So today, continuing with Zechariah, and again, not trying to go over the whole book, but many times the thread of thought goes from beginning to end. We had where he began with a call of repentance, then how his heart is for Israel and he wants to bring them back. It is also the establishing of Zerubbabel as a sign of God's desire for these people to come back and reestablish in the land. You have the setting up of Joshua, who is Yeshua, who is Jesus. It's interesting how this high priest Joshua doesn't just wear the robe of a high priest, he also has the crown of a king. He is called the branch. Who is the branch? The branch is Jesus. We even have scriptures that lead this to being Jesus. And he says, all of this will happen if you will diligently obey the voice of the Lord. So again, these things will happen, but there's still parts where these men have to be obedient. There is another vision that happens 2 years after these first visions. And this is about how what worship is. Many of the men that were worshiping Jehovah were wondering, should we still worship this way or worship that way or keep this day or keep this kind of prayer? And he's like, you're not getting it. It's about your heart. It's about how you treat one another, executing justice, looking after your brother, caring for the widows, etc. It's like having compassion on your brother. Therefore it's come to pass that he cried and would not hear, so they cried and I would not hear. He's saying that to the people around them. He's saying that even to their forefathers. They wouldn't listen to the voices that were calling out for their help, and now, of course, they're calling out to me, and I'm not helping them. So using them as an example. His eyes are for Jerusalem in chapter 8, that he has this jealousy. He wants Jerusalem. He wants to put himself there. He wants to be with his people. And he talks about that all through chapter 8. And so how he wants to get back in Jerusalem. Chapter 9 is going against the enemies of Jerusalem, these people who have been enemies all along the way, and how the Lord will defend them. The Lord of hosts shall defend them, talking about Israel. And they shall devour and subdue with a sling and a stone. They shall drink and make a noise as through wine. These people are going to rejoice over their enemies because these are the enemies of Jehovah. Chapter 10, he wants participation. He talks, ask. Ask ye of the Lord rain in the time of the latter rain. If it's time for rain, still ask for rain. If it's time for something, ask for it. He is the one who gives provision. Be participating, not just anticipating, not sitting around waiting for it to rain, but go ask for it to rain. So he wants them as a part of the game. He says he's going to strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph. Just like we had all those prophets that were talking about how he's wanting to come after Israel, how Israel had sinned and Israel had turned away, and this was all before the Babylonian captivity. Now we have strong scriptures about reconciliation, restoration, and strength, that they will be his arm down here for the things he wants to do. Chapter 11, about the enemies. Oh, Lebanon, that the fire may devour their cedars. Howl, fir tree, for the cedars has fallen. The cedar are the strong nations that are up in the north. They shall fall. He also goes to the south. He's going to use Israel. There are times when he goes in and uses supernatural and uses earthquakes, but he will use these people to go against their neighbors for the cause of Jehovah. He talks against those. He says that feed the flocks of the slaughter. These people are considered, and we kind of don't like that as humans. How do you have these people? But they've chosen to be there. They pushed him away. They did not want to come Jehovah. Anyone could have come to Jehovah. Anyone could have proselytized in. Anyone could have started worshiping. It was an open field. And with Jesus, it's even more open. He's removed all the barriers. And still people say no. But he talks about this. I will have no more pity the inhabitants of the land, saith the Lord, but I will deliver men into their neighbors' hands. You get the idea that maybe some of these horses that went around just kept things down, kept things kind of depressed, kept things at a certain level so that we would not prey upon one another in strength. But here, I'm not going to protect them anymore from one another. I'm going to let them go back and forth. He talks about the two staves, the beautiful and the bands, and he's using these staves. These are like shepherd's hooks. how he broke one. And the first one looks to be Jesus. Talks about how he was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Okay, my beauty is gone. The band of the Old Testament. So right now, as a shepherd, he was relying on his beauty of who he was to keep men in check. Then he relied on his word, the bands, to keep them in order. Now he's going to go to another one, which will be the new covenant. It's implied there. He doesn't state that. But he gets rid of beauty and he gets rid of bands. And he's going to make, I think this at the end of 11 is talking about future times like the Antichrist, because he talks about raising up a shepherd. But this shepherd will not will not seek the young, nor heal that which is broken. He is like an opposite of what Jesus was. So we get that. And 12, the burden of the Lord for Israel has stretched forth the heaven. He lays the foundation of the earth. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling. We see this one especially today. This is 2023. Jerusalem and Hamas are going at one another, and we see Jerusalem is a cup of trembling. Everybody's kind of concerned what's going on there. It's interesting how this one city keeps coming back into play. And I'll make Jerusalem a cup of trembling for all people, and all that burden themselves with it shall be cut into pieces. So if you're going to burden yourself with this, be careful. You're going to get cut into pieces. So all the people of the earth will be gathered together against it. And that day I will smite every horse with astonishment and every rider with madness. It's like there's just a craziness, a zeal, an untempered fury that is almost unbridled. That the men will consider like they're in madness. The horses will be in astonishment, just roaring after chasing after this war. The governors of Judea shall say in their hearts, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength in the Lord of hosts, saith God. See, they're seeking. And this is really going latter days, even premillennial reign, from our understanding, that people will seek, the whole world will come against, and the people will seek, and they will be found by their God. And in that day will I make the governors of Judea like the heath of fire among the woods, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf, and they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left, and Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place. This must have sounded good to the ears of Zerubbabel and all the men there, and Joshua, that in this far time, this city that you're building will have this kind of power, and their God will be there. The Lord will save the tents of Judah. First, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. So he's going to make sure he does this in order, so there is an internal struggle. In that day the Lord shall defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. So we see this among here in chapter 12. All he talks about is, I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplications. By grace, I'm going to meet your supplications. You bring me your needs, I'll meet them. So he's really getting this, really is what we would call koinonia. This really connection, this commitment, this bond to these people. He says there will be great mourning in Jerusalem, and over the fact that they will find out that they were wrong. You get a messianic here, and they will look upon me whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son. In the latter days, they will know that it is Jesus. They will know that they pierced him. That's what this is about right here in chapter 10. It talks about it's messianic. And they looked upon me whom they pierced. And look what they said here. They looked upon me whom they pierced. Look at the wording there. This is God saying he is Jesus. Look, they will look upon me whom they pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only son, and shall be in bitterness for him. They're going to feel bitter. And you finish the chapter with this bitterness for Messiah coming, and we pierced him, and we didn't embrace him. 13, in that day shall a fountain open up in the house of David, and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanness. He's going to clean the city when Messiah comes back. He's going to cleanse the city, and it shall come to pass that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no longer be remembered. I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. He's going to clean the land up when he comes back. Again, they're just now laying the stones and getting the bricks going and getting Judaism going with the temple, and yet all of this wonderful stuff is going to happen. Excuse me, let me catch up here. And it comes to pass that the prophet shall be ashamed every one of his vision, and they that prophesy neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive. A lot of the prophets would walk around looking like prophets so they could be heard like a prophet. He talks about deceptiveness here of prophets and of shepherds. And he shall say, I am no prophet, I am a husbandman, for man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. And one shall say unto him, What are the wounds that are in thy hands? And he shall answer and say, Those were the wounds in the house of my friends. This is another messianic here, that there is a prophet coming, that he will not have a rough garment. He's not going to try to deceive you with roughness, but he is going to be, he is going to be more acting like a husbandman. He's not going to act like these prophets. He's not going to act like this big showy thing, fire coming down from heaven and gobbling up sacrifices and floating axe heads and all these demonstrative things. Now, Jesus did demonstrative things, but here we see him, he's going to have these holes in his hands. Well, who are you talking about? Who are you talking about that has holes in their hands? And where he says, these are the wounds of my, and they shall say unto him, What are these wounds in thy hands? And he shall say, those that which I have wounded in the house of my friends, awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against him that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts, smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. Jesus got smit. He was smit by the Lord, and the sheep got scattered. Then he comes to pull them back. And it came to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts thereof shall be cut off, and a third shall be left thereof. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and redeem them as silver is refined. And they shall call upon my name. This is again going now into end times. I know this gets a little confusing. We're jumping around. It's like this guy is, God is having Zerubbabel connect some important dots for us and for future believers, that they might see some things. And he's connecting them along a messianic line to the millennial reign. He's kind of skipping over what we call the church age and kind of hitting some high points about Yeshua, high points about Messiah, and then going on over to the millennial reign. It's almost like we're connecting the dots between here to Jesus and then going over straight to millennial reign, and on we go. So there's not a lot said about this church period that we've talked about. So we're just kind of looking at how this affects Jerusalem. Again, if you superimpose Daniel 9, where he talks about the 70 weeks, 69 shall pass, and then another one is to come. It's like in Zechariah, we're talking about the 69, and then we go and connect it completely to the 70, as if there was nothing in between. So here we have that. So this is why to us, New Testament, it seems kind of awkward, because we're going from Jerusalem to Messiah to millennial reign. But that's how this is. Jerusalem to Messiah to millennial reign. So he's talking about how Messiah is going to be in the millennial reign. He gives some of the insights. He also talks about earlier how he would come on the foal of an ass. He talked about how that he would be wounded. He sold for 30 pieces of silver, that he was wounded in the house of his friends, that he has holes in his hands. I mean, you can't get much clearer. Zechariah alone has so much pro-Jesus of Nazareth in it. It's unbelievable when you go and see all this. But he talks about in the future, and we hear that in Revelation, where a third were lost for this, and a third were lost for that, and a third went, this woe happened, and this woe happened. To weed out unbelieving Israel from believing Israel, it's going to take 1 in 3. He's going to get rid of 2/3 of Israel that's unbelieving, and hold on to the believing. Behold, the day cometh, in 14, that thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, and I will gather all nations against Jerusalem for battle. This is Ezekiel 38:39. This is not what's in the news right now. He's going to gather them all together. Right now, we may have a pre-gathering, kind of a stirring the pot to get the nations to focus on Jerusalem. But there'll come a time when he's going to draw them. They're not going to draw themselves. Don't think for a second that independent things are happening. God is moving. He wants these people to come in. Remember that he rose up Syria one time so that he might show his strength to Ahab by the taking down of Syria. He's going to bring in his enemies to the valley of decision, and there it will be decided. So we talk about that all through 14. He talks about the city will be taken, though. So he's talking about this city, this wonderful city that Jehovah is going to be in. It's going to be taken. Things are going to happen to the people there. But it says Messiah will come in chapter 4. And his feet shall stand that day upon the Mount of Olives. Whose feet? His feet. Who's the him? Messiah. Which is before Jerusalem to the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave into in its midst, therefore from the east towards the west, and there shall be a great valley. Now, where did Jesus pray? Where did he go to pray? Mount of Olives. And he left from Golgotha. He went back up, and he's going to come down and touch the Mount of Olives. And there'll be a great valley there. And people shall flee for the valley of the mountains, and they shall reach into a certain place, and they shall flee. And if there's an earthquake going on, which many of them remember the earthquake recorded in the day of Uzziah, he uses that as a reference for the mighty earthquake that happens when Messiah comes. And it shall come to pass that the light shall not be clear nor dark. It shall be one day shall be as known to the Lord, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that the eventime shall be in light. There'll be a time when there's only light. There won't be darkness. When Messiah gets here, I don't know if it's just for this period of time to show that he is Messiah, but there'll be light as if it's noonday or as if it's light time all night. That there will not be a nighttime because Messiah is here. And there'll be living waters that go out of Jerusalem. And they'll go down to the former sea, and they'll go up to the hinder sea. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. When Messiah gets here, he's going to be king over all the earth. He's giving us this 4:1:1, and to read this with Daniel, and then read Revelation. And you'll get a better understanding of what's happening. Sometimes we only do Revelation. We don't look at Zechariah. I must admit it's been kind of awkward for me to try to fit it in because so much eschatology in our thinking is only 2 books when we should incorporate a third. And it talks about how he will, and there shall be a plague thereof, and the Lord shall smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. He's going to be adamantly against people who are against. And remember, this is not just the evil Jerusalem. This isn't Jerusalem right or wrong. You've been an enemy of Jerusalem. If Jerusalem's in error, let her God take care of her. Don't you move in and be a part of that. He's never liked that. So he's going to take care of Jerusalem. So there'll be a plague of the horse and of the mule and of the camel. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations that came against Jerusalem, even shall come from year to worship the king. So the nations that warred, those that were left will come to worship Messiah. And then they shall do that. He talks about this, that there's also punishments for those who choose not to. You are to come and worship Messiah and do the things the way Messiah is wanting them done, the statutes and the values of God. And so Messiah is going to do that. And that day shall there'll be bells on the horses, holiness unto the Lord, and the pots of the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. There's going to be provision for people. So he's going to drive out all of the foreign gods. And in every part of Jerusalem and in Judea shall be holy unto the Lord, and all that sacrifice shall come and take of them and seethe upon. And that day there shall be no more Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts. He's going to get rid of the Canaanites. He's going to be pure Israel, inviting the nations in. So we see Zechariah is an interesting book because it begins with a call of worship. It goes through different things going on in the establishment of Jerusalem, then what Jerusalem means to God, how God's going to deal with Jerusalem, how God is going to provide a Messiah, and how that Messiah's reign is going to look. And he's doing this so that men might come back to God. And this is a fulfillment of the promise to Abraham, that his seed would be the sand of the sea and stars of the sky, and his promises to David that there will always be a man sitting on the throne of David. So we see all of this dovetailing together. Every I will be dotted, every T will be crossed, and at that time the law will be fulfilled in all the jots and tittles. And Messiah will reign and be worshipped forever as the King, the Lord of hosts. And if you're in Christ, you're going to see it. It's going to be good. Look forward to it.